there, it is Becky from Wild at Heart Farm, and today is sourdough baking day. So we have pulled our sourdough starter, the little bit that we've got in this jar left over from our last bake. We've pulled that out, let it come to room temperature, and now we're going to feed it to create the leaven for our next loaves of bread. I just keep mine in a mason jar. I put the lid on, not overly tight, and in between bakes I will store that in the refrigerator. Okay, so you can see how little I've got left from last time's bake, and we want to measure. So I've got about 25-30 grams of starter in this jar, and I want to add about 150 grams of water, filtered water, no chlorine in it, at room temperature. I'm actually right now using just above room temperature because it's really cold where I am right now, and 150 grams of my white organic all-purpose flour. I'm just going to grab a spoon here, and so I'm just going to go ahead and add the water first. So it's equal parts water and flour. And then 150 grams for this recipe of our flour. Use as good a quality flour as you can afford and as is available to you wherever you are. 250, 285, there we go, just over 300. And then we're just going to give that a good mix. There you go. So it's just a shaggy, kind of a shaggy mess right now. So we'll set that to the side for a good couple hours. And I like to just put the lid on, not too tight. You can also use just a band and a cheesecloth or a paper towel on the top of it. And then I'm just going to put a rubber band around the base of that to show where we've started this process, because what we're looking for is for that to double approximately. And again, I can't give you the exact amount of time because it's going to depend. If I leave this in my kitchen right now, it's going to take quite some time, probably maybe even up to 8-9 hours to get to the point that it's doubled. So a lot of times you can start this right before you go to bed at night if you want to bake in the morning, or if you want to bake during the day, maybe in the evening, you can start this first thing in the morning. So put it in a place that's not too cold, but you don't want it to be too hot either. You don't want to cook the leaven. You don't want to, if you heat this up too much, you're going to kill all that good bacteria that's in there that is making the leaven grow. And right now what's happening when we feed it, it's going to start eating that carbohydrate, turn it into sugar. That's what creates the bubbles and gives us that beautiful natural leaven. And it's almost like it's pre-digesting, it's fermenting while it's in this stage and while it's in the dough stage, so that it's a lot easier for your body to break that down when you eat it. That's one of the great benefits of sourdough baking. All right, we'll be back to create the dough once our leaven is finished rising. Okay, now we're back and our starter is all ready to go. As you can see, it is nicely doubled there. It's got some beautiful bubble formation. It hasn't started to drop at all. And so we're ready to go on and start to make our dough for our sourdough. Now I'm going to make 4 small loaves. This is a double recipe of the recipe that you will find that I'm going to provide for you. So I've doubled kind of everything. So we're just going to pour as much as is going to come out of the jar. And then we're going to leave the rest of that. And that's going to be our base for our starter for the next time we go to bake. I normally do 4 loaves at a time. I figure if I'm going to take the time to do this, I'm going to double up the recipe. So you, at this point, can either feed this again and go ahead and get another leaven started. You can pop this into the fridge. You want to feed it occasionally, probably every couple of weeks if it's going to be sitting in the fridge, more often than that if you're going to leave it out on the counter. But I just take that little bit that's left in there, pop it in the fridge, and then I just refresh it when I'm ready to get going again. You might want to actually start refreshing it maybe the night before. You can have a little bit of discard. It'll just make it a more active leaven at that point. So we've got that in there. Next thing I like to do is to add my water at this point. So, and I like to do everything in weight measurements. So this recipe calls for 320 grams of water. I'm going to double that. So I'm going to make that around 680, 700. Okay. So, and really important that you want to use filtered water. You do not want chlorine in this because the chlorine can kill that beneficial bacteria. So there we go. Just a tiny bit over 700. I'm not too worried about it. This recipe that I'm showing you right now is it's not a real high hydration. I find it's a good starting recipe to work on because it's not going to be quite so complicated to be working with the dough. It's not going to be as sticky as some of your higher hydration sourdough dough can be to work with. All right, so we've got that in there, and now I'm going to add the salt. The recipe calls for 12 grams, so I'm going to double that. Just tar that out. And so I'm going to go ahead and put 24 grams of salt. Again, I'm doubling. Not quite. And you really do want to have the salt in your recipe. You're going to have some pretty bland bread if you don't add the salt. And it's at this point that I prefer to add my inclusions. So if I'm adding, a lot of times I'll do a Parmesan and olive, or I will do like a jalapeno and cheddar. Some people like to add that later on. I just find for me, it's much easier just to add that in at this point. And those are some recipes that I'll be showing you later on. Okay, right now just stick to the basics. Okay, so I'm going to whisk that together now. You can use a spatula or a fork or a spoon. I've got this handy dandy Danish whisk that I like to use. Okay, so we've got that incorporated. Put that to the side. All right, now it's time to start adding our flour. So this recipe calls for 1,200, when I'm doubling it, it calls for 1,200 grams of flour. I'm going to do a combination of organic white and some organic sprouted spelt. So I'm going to do 1,000 grams of the white and then 1,000 grams or 200 grams of the sprouted spelt. So again, make sure that you are using filtered water. You do not want chlorine. What's going to happen if you're using chlorine, it is going to interfere with your natural leaven that's in the sourdough, and it has the potential to kill off that natural leaven, right? So we're just going to add our sprouted spelt here, 200 grams of that. There we go. So we're up to 1,200 with that. And I'm just going to get in there and start the process with the whisk. And we don't need to incorporate absolutely everything. What we're looking for is called a shaggy dough. We're just getting the water and the flour mixing together at this point. And what will happen is the gluten is going to start to form. Now, depending on the conditions in your house, that's why it's very difficult to just give somebody a recipe for sourdough, because it really depends on the flour that you're using. It depends a lot on how warm your house may be. I'm going to just wet my hand there a little bit. And it's going to depend on the leaven itself. It can even depend on the the humidity, and it can depend on where you are at sea level. There's just a lot of variables with this. And so you're going to learn how to read the dough. Like I said, right now, we're not really worried about getting this 100%. Oh, just getting this shaggy dough going. And then we're just going to let this sit for about a half an hour, maybe a little bit more. It's not too fussy at this point. And start to let the gluten start to form in your dough. Okay, I'm just going to show you at this point, if you try to pick that up, it just rips apart. There's no gluten forming right now. But as we go through this series of what we call stretch and fold, which I'll show you in the next step, you will see that we get this, what's called a window pane. You're going to be able to pick that up and stretch it without it breaking. Get as much of this off as I can. Don't want to just flush all our hard work and money in this flour down the drain. You can do this in a mixer if you want, but I think you really want to have the satisfaction of knowing what the dough feels like as you're starting to create these. And this is a real kind of an artisan approach to making bread. Okay, so I'll be back in about a half an hour or so with our next step. Okay, forgot to mention, you want to just cover that up with either a wet tea towel. I've got this lid from a pot that fits perfectly onto this vessel. So we're just going to let that sit now. Okay, I am back and it's time to have a look and do our first set of stretch and fold. Okay, so this has been sitting, I think it's been about half an hour, maybe 40 minutes. And the dough is looking good. Wait till I will show you how you can see the gluten formation. So in this series of stretch and folds, you just want to grab it from underneath, pull it up high, and see how much more, like it's not breaking now. The gluten is forming really nicely. We just want to turn the bowl and do that. Keep your hand wet. A lot of times I'll do this right next to the sink as well. And just keep bringing that over itself to tuck it all the little ends in on top of themselves. You can see it's starting to form a nice ball. I like to just pick it up and do the last little bit. Just tuck it inside of itself. And look how nicely that gluten is forming now. It's starting to get really smooth. We're just gonna pop that back in there, put that lid back on, or if you're using a towel, and we're just gonna let that sit again for another 20 minutes to half an hour. We'll come back and do another series of those stretch and folds. Okay, we're back for our next set of stretch and folds. You can see that the dough has relaxed a little bit. We're just gonna go ahead and do exactly the same. Just gonna get my hand wet here and come underneath, and look how nice that dough is getting now. I'm gonna pull it up as far as it'll come, and then just rotate and do about 4 of these. Oh, the dough is feeling absolutely beautiful now. Just pulling it in on itself to create another taut ball of dough. I'm just gonna pick that up. You can keep this in the bowl and just keep folding up. This is just how I prefer to do it. Again, you're not gonna be able to do this with a real hydrated dough, but with this one, you certainly can. We're just gonna pop that back in there. Now I'm gonna do another, probably 2 of exactly the same, about a half an hour apart, and I'll bring you back to show you the last one that I do in about an hour or so. Okay, I'm back. I've done 2 other stretch and folds in the meantime, and now we've got this beautiful dough. I'm gonna do another quick stretch and fold, and then I'm gonna transfer this dough into this Cambro, which I like to use this because it's got, one thing, it's got a lid so I can let it sit out a little bit longer. Don't have to worry about it drying out. If I need to put this into the fridge because of the time of day, I can do that. But I can easily tell where it is in the bulk fermentation process. And I like it to get about 3/4 of that container. I like it to kind of double or maybe just a little bit more. I'll show you when I get that in there. So I'm just gonna take our dough and I'm gonna, again, just pull that around itself. I probably should have wet my hands a little bit, but it'll be fine. And then we're gonna pop it into that Cambro container. Set that to the side. And there we go. So you can see right now that the lowest part is at about 2 liters. And so I'm gonna let that just a little over double. And then that's gonna be our perfect bulk fermentation, and then we can move on from there. So I'm just gonna pop that on the top. And again, if it's late at night, or if you get called out, or you just need some more time, it's really simple to just pop that in the fridge and slow down this process. Keep it in a cool area, and then pull it back out when you want to continue on. But it'll even continue to ferment and rise when it's in cold conditions. So I'm going to let this just a little over double, and I will be back to share the next process, which is going to be letting it rest for a little bit on the countertop, and then scaling that, splitting it up, and getting it into the bannetons ready for our bake. Okay, our bulk proof is completed now. I like to let it get up to, in this one, just about where the 4 liters is, and that's why I like to use this during the bulk fermentation so that I can really tell. So what we're going to do now is to just take that out of the Cambro holder, out onto the countertop. Now, I don't use flour to work with it. I've got quartz countertops. So if you're working on a different surface, you may want to just really lightly dust your counter with a little bit of all-purpose flour. Look at that beautiful dough. Isn't that lovely? So what I'm going to do now is just to let this just sit. I don't want to play with it too much. I'm going to just let this sit and rest on the countertop for maybe 10 or 15 minutes. I'm going to cover that with a nice clean cloth, and I'll be back to do the what we call the scaling, which is dividing the dough and then doing a little pre-shape on the dough before we put that into the bannetons. Okay, we're back, and we are going to split up this dough, or what they call scaling, although I'm not going to scale it. Scaling just means that you're making sure that you've got, for me, I'm doing 4 loaves right now. I don't really care if they're exact, so I'm just going to split this up, and then we're just going to do a little bit of a pre-shaping of it. So let's just cut those apart. So if you're just doing the one batch, you're going to get enough for 2 of these smaller loaves, or even if you want to do one great big one. I like a smaller loaf. Look at those beautiful bubbles that are coming in there. I like a smaller loaf because it stays fresh longer. I find that whether you're keeping it for yourself or you're gift giving, that this small loaf stays fresh until it's done. Look at the bubbles. All right, so we're just going to do a real quick. I don't want to disturb these too much, but we're just going to shape them into our rounds, what we call a boule. Oh, these are gorgeous. And then we're just going to let them sit and rest for a few more minutes. Then we're going to come back. That is going wild there. We're going to come back, and then we're going to do the final shaping, and we're going to put them into the bannetons where they're going to sit, and they're going to proof longer. And I like to do a long proof. So I'll explain what that's all about when we come back. All right, see you soon. Okay, we are back, and we are going to do our shaping and put the dough into the banneton. So this is the size banneton that I really like to use. This is a 7-inch, and I preferred to keep the fabric in these, but if you like, you can take this fabric out. If you like to have that ring showing up, my personal preference is I like it to be nice and smooth. Now I've used these for quite a while, and I don't find with this hydration of dough I need to put any rice flour in. However, you're gonna have to figure that out when you're using it, especially at the beginning. You're probably gonna wanna put some rice flour into the banneton to keep your dough from sticking, especially if you start venturing into some higher hydration. But with this loaf, we're just fine, and you'll see later on that it's just gonna slip right out, okay? So we've had these resting here for a few minutes. Oh, this is what I'm gonna show you, some other bannetons that we've got as well. So this is, I think this is a 9-inch, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, might even be an 8-inch, but you can see it's a lot bigger than this one. So if I was only making 2 loaves here, then I would just use 2 of these, and I would make 2 out of this dough that I had, but we're gonna do the 4. And then we also have the batard, which is an elongated one as well. So lots of different bannetons, and it really just is the ultimate shape that you're looking for. So this is almost always what I use, and I have tons of these. I've made, the most that I've made in a week when I was selling some previously was, I think I did 64 loaves in 1 week. Now that was a lot because I had just a small oven at that time. Okay, so we're gonna go ahead and do the final shaping of these. I'm just gonna flip that over, and again, I'm just gonna get these ones out of the way. And again, because I have these quartz countertops, and because this is a lower hydration loaf, I don't really need to use any flour at this time. So we're just going to do this series of folding in on itself, and then I just like to gently come around to create this little package, and then start pulling it back on itself. And here you don't want to use flour, because if you were using flour, it's not going to stick to the countertop. Now, if you are on a countertop that's not allowing you to do this, you're not getting that sticking action, something else that you can do is by taking this tool, this bench scraper, and just folding it in underneath on itself. And what you're trying to do here is to just create a lot of tension on the top of that dough. Okay, and you can Google, because there's a lot of different techniques as well. This is just one that I've gotten comfortable with, and I like it. It just seems to be very simple for me. And then we're just gonna flop that out into here, and that's gonna sit. And at this point, I'm gonna let this probably sit out for an hour or so, but it's getting late in the day, and I'm gonna slip that into a Ziploc bag and pop it into the fridge. I don't like to create my sourdough and cook it on the same day, because I like it to get more fermentation. I like it to get quite sour, not too sour, but I like it to have a lot of flavor. And the longer you leave it to ferment, the more not the gluten, but the more that the wheat, the protein is going to break down, and it's going to be even easier to digest. Now, this isn't gluten-free. It's not going to take it to the point that somebody that's celiac is going to be able to eat this. Of course, their system just won't allow that. But a lot of people that are kind of sensitive to gluten can eat sourdough. Put that in. I'm just going to make sure that we're going to tuck all of those little pieces in. And it's at this point as well that if you wanted to, I would spray this a little bit with some nice clean water out of a clean bottle, and then you could lay some sesame seeds in there if you wanted to. Okay, so again, just folding this on itself and then creating this little package, And then start your tugging to get lots of tension. And what this is going to do is going to give you a nice tight skin on that. And it's going to keep all of the air bubbles inside there. And you'll see how important that is when we go to bake these tomorrow. Now I've left my dough like this in the bannetons up to like sometimes 48, 72 hours in a fridge. And the nice thing about this is that once you've got it in the fridge, you can do it on your own time schedule. So a lot of times I'll get lots of these into the fridge, and then I'll just take my time baking them. You can also par bake and freeze, and then when you are ready to have them, this one's quite a bit smaller. Obviously my scaling wasn't good and my eyes weren't good to see that, but that's fine. This will be a nice little loaf. So you can par bake them and then freeze them in a Ziploc or vacuum seal bag, and then pull them out and thaw it until you're ready to do the final bake. And you should only take about 15 minutes then for that final bake, just to warm that up. All right, there we are. Number 4, good cute little one. So I'm gonna put these into a Ziploc bag. I'm gonna let them sit out for about an hour or so. And then I'm gonna pop those in the fridge. You don't wanna leave them out too long, because again, one of the things that you don't wanna do is to overproof. If you overproof, everything's gonna get used up and you're not gonna get that beautiful rise when we go to bake them. You also don't wanna underproof. But these are, and I just know by kind of looking, that's why I like to use this container, because I can tell exactly where it is and you'll get the feel of it. My first, oh my gosh, it took me, I don't even know how many times. I should have been writing it down, but I was so distraught. I thought I was never going to get a good loaf. And if you ask Dan, the first time that I actually got a loaf that rose, when I took off the lid of the pan, I screamed. He thought something was the matter. And it was just because I had finally created a sourdough that I liked. But then I'll see some people that they just get it going right away. The kind of the key is to have a good starter, and to just let it do its thing. You just got to kind of be patient with sourdough. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to put these into the Ziploc bags. I'm going to let them sit out for a little bit. I'm going to put them into the fridge, and then I will come back when we get ready to bake sometime tomorrow. Okay, it is time to bake your sourdough. First thing that I want to do is talk about the vessel that you're going to cook that in. Now I've got these really lovely Staub Dutch ovens. You don't need to start out with something like this. This was something that I invested in, 3 years after I started baking sourdough. You can start out with something as simple as a roasting pan even. Now I will tell you, if you are using a thinner roasting pan, I don't find that you have to necessarily preheat that Dutch oven. But something like this that is quite thick really does make a difference in preheating. So the first thing that I'm gonna do is pop these guys into the oven. I've got a nice hot oven. I usually bake around 475, sometimes 500. The one thing you do want to watch out for, that I will caution you, is bring your rack up a little bit further if you find that you're getting a really dark bottom of your bread and you want to avoid that. Okay, so I have mine kind of in the middle rack here. These guys are really heavy, so that might be another thing that you want to think about before investing in Dutch ovens, is how much you actually want to lift, because if you have any issues of mobility, you might want to consider that. So just gonna get these lids on and get these nice and hot, and then I will come back. I could have put them on before, but I had them on I just washed them But you can put your lid on before you actually put them into the oven. So I'm gonna let that heat up for probably 15, 20 minutes. They're quite a thick Dutch oven. And then I'm gonna come back and we are gonna put our dough into the oven. And more exciting than that, wait until you see them come out. It's so much fun. Never ever gets tired of opening up that lid and see what you've got inside there. So I'll be back soon. Okay, we're ready to bake. Yay! So first thing I have to do is take my Dutch oven out. I'm gonna do this one at a time. Normally, if I'm not showing you, I would just pop it in there, but I really wanna be able to show you kind of the technique that I am using here. So you can tell that these are nice and hot because these ones get this real deep, rich red color. Take that off and get our dough ready. So these have been in this plastic bag in the fridge just to keep them from overproofing. And it has been, well, I did it last night and it's now just about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. So, and I've left them even longer than this. The longer you leave them, the richer the taste of the sourdough will get. So if you're looking for something really sour, you can let it go even longer. So I'm just placing this out on my parchment paper. And now what you really want to do is make a slice in the top of it, because what's going to happen is this bread's going to puff up and it needs somewhere to escape. And so my favorite is to just go straight across the top. You want to go at a little bit of an angle, and that's just going to open right up. It's called scoring. And then I'm just going to take that parchment paper and I'm going to place it down in my hot vessel. And this is kind of my secret weapon. I take ice cubes and I place those 5 or 6 of these smaller ice cubes just down inside the Dutch oven. And what that's going to do is create steam for you. It's going to give you some blisters. It's going to keep the crust a little bit softer as the dough is rising inside the oven. And you'll see the effects of that after. So go back on. Now, kind of a cool story is that when villagers were baking their bread, they would get their own, everybody would have their own scoring technique. And so that's really the only reason that there's different types of scoring, I think. You can do the cross on the top. I think it's really cool when people do like wheat patterns. My preferred is just this real simple 1 slash along the top. Piece of something stuck there. Okay, so right across the top. And this is just a razor blade really on there. Okay, that one. Put my ice around. Can you hear how hot that is? And then I'm going to go ahead and put this one inside the oven as well, and we'll be back in around 35-40 minutes to do the reveal. Okay, it is time to have a look at this amazing sourdough. So I'm going to bring you closer in to have a look as we do the unveiling. So it's now been about 35 minutes since we put that in. So let's have a look. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to turn that oven down about 50 degrees. So I started out at about 475 and now I'm going to put it down to about 425. Okay, I'm going to try and get this right out so that you can have a good look. Can you see? All right, what do we got? Oh, you guys! Amazing! Look at that! Absolutely perfect. One of the biggest tips I can tell you is to not overproof, especially in the bulk fermentation. That was a time that would get away on me a lot. Look at that. Oh, I wish you could smell it. Okay, so we're going to take the lid off. We're going to put it back in there for about another 15 to 20 minutes until it gets just to the right crispness that I like and the color that I like. And your sourdough is probably going to be around 200 210 degrees. And I'll show you how I do the, use my thermometer just to check that temperature to make sure that everything is fantastic. Okay, let's get these beauties out of the oven now and check the internal temperature. This is something you don't have to do all of the time, but as you're getting used to it, I highly recommend it because you don't want it to be gummy inside. Okay, so I'm gonna actually turn this back up because I've got a couple more loaves to do. Oh my goodness. So pleased with these ones. Put these out on a cooling rack. There we go. Aren't they lovely? And then I'm just gonna find right in the center, pop my little thermometer in, and it's going up, up, up. I'm certain that these ones are done. And look at the beautiful color. Move that over a little bit. Look at that beautiful color. Yeah, we're going right up. That is at, yeah, it's hitting 208 now. They're perfect. Okay, so there you have it. Last tip I'm going to give you is make sure that you leave them to cool for at least an hour, probably more than that. You don't want to cut into a loaf of sourdough bread too early because it's going to make the inside really gummy and you're not going to enjoy it afterwards. So let these cool down nicely and then enjoy. If you've got any other questions at all for me, let me know. And if you need your own sourdough starter, I'm happy to send you out a free sample of mine in a powdered form, and I will also link you to how to reconstitute that and get going for yourself. So hope you have a great day. Bye here from Wild at Heart Farm. I'm back with one little bonus segment here at the end. I forgot about tasting. So let's cut this open and see what they call the crumb, what the internal looks like, and kind of the texture of the inside of it, how tight the crumb is, which means that there aren't big holes in it, or how loose. Now this one's going to be a tighter crumb because it is less hydrated, and it's kind of how I kind of prefer mine for just a regular eating loaf. So I'm going to cut right down the center just so that I can show you the beautiful inside of that. Oh my goodness, you guys. Look at that. Honestly, so beautiful. And then I'm just going to cut myself a little piece here and put some beautiful grass-fed butter on that. I wish you had smell-o-vision. Ooh, my butter's a little bit hard because it's not that warm in this kitchen. So let's get some on there. Just gonna cut that in half. This is honestly, this is one of the nicest loaves that I've ever baked. My starter is just doing fantastic right now. So here we go. So beautiful. The texture is just perfect. I couldn't be happier. I hope this has inspired you to make what's a really simple mixture of just flour and salt and water, mixing that together to create this beautiful artisan loaf of bread that's healthier than a regular yeasted bread. And if you are gluten sensitive, if you're gluten sensitive, this is probably going to be a whole lot easier on your system. And so yeah, enjoy. Talk soon.